Nilseanochtin oksepakwali ximoaxilti, autlasokamati pampa antlachiat Nahuatl Tlahtocan. Axka nitlahtoa inemilistlahkuiloli Nahuatl Tlahtoli. I would like to begin this historical account by first acknowledging the land that we live on. What we now call North and South America were populated by millions of peoples before Europeans or any non-native peoples arrived. We had our own governments and spoke our own languages, many of which, like Nahuatl, are still spoken by indigenous peoples today. I often hear this narrative that we somehow just disappeared. Well, we did. Not because we physically vanished, but because far too often our stories are under and misrepresented in history. After all, history is written by the victors, right? The story usually begins in 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But like I said, there were already millions of people here. 90% of the populations of North and South America were killed by disease and violence. That's tens of millions of people, which was about 10% of the global population at the time. Most of the survivors were stripped of their indigenous languages and forced to speak European languages like English and Spanish. They were also demonized and forced to convert to Christianity. A Spanish priest named Bartolomé de las Casas explained in his own eyewitness account in the 16th century that the Spaniards hanged 13 natives at a time in honor of Christ our Savior and the 12 apostles. So if you ever wondered why more people speak English and Spanish than any language that's actually from this continent, the answer is colonization and genocide. But let's rewind a little bit. Let's talk about Nahuatl. Nahuatl is a language in the Uto-Aztecan language group. Notice I said language and not dialect or dialecto. I would refrain from calling indigenous languages dialects because it implies that they are somehow inferior to other languages like Spanish, which again originally comes from Europe, not Mexico. The Uto-Aztecan language group exists in Mexico as well as the United States, suggesting that the Native American people who speak these languages have a common history, or even ancestry. It is related to other indigenous languages such as Huichol, Yaqui, Tarahumara, Shoshone, Comanche, Luiseño, and Paiute, just to name a few.
It's evident related native languages are prevalent across the lines defined by the malign and the malevolent.
Just by looking at this map of California, you can see that a large portion of the state is home to Uto-Aztecan tribal groups. Now here's the big question. If there is a common history between Nahuatl people and these other groups of Native American peoples, then where did our first ancestors come from? In my research, I've come across two main theories as to the origin of our proto-Uto-Aztecan ancestors, a northern origin model and a southern origin model. First, let me be very clear. Some of the information that I'm about to present comes from the theories of non-native anthropologists. On the other hand, native peoples have their own histories of creation and migration, which should never be left out of the conversation when discussing native peoples' histories. However, out of respect for the different native tribal groups, I will not go into detail about their creation histories because those are sacred stories. So let's start off with the non-native theories. An anthropologist named Jane H. Hill believes that the Proto-Uto-Aztecan people migrated from the south into the north based on the cultivation patterns of maize. A genealogist for the Paiute tribe of Utah named Oresta Lombardi also supported the southern origin model. He believed that the Proto-Uto-Aztecan people migrated north from the area of Guatemala and southern Mexico. However, contradicting Jane H. Hill's claim based on the cultivation patterns of maize, linguist David Leadham Shaw and anthropologist Scott G. Ortman argue that genetic evidence does not support speakers of Uto-Aztecan languages as the main agent in the spread of corn agriculture in the American Southwest. Furthermore, they explain that the southern distribution in Mexico is all Nahuatl subfamily. The diversity of Uto-Aztecan is in the north, suggesting a homeland north of Mesoamerica. Which brings us to native creation and migration histories. Even Jane H. Hill mentions Nahuatl historical traditions in her work, referring to the exodus of the Azteca people from Aztlan. By the way, the proper Nahuatl pronunciation is Aztlan, not Aztlan, but we'll talk more about that when we get into how to pronounce Nahuatl words. According to the story as told by anthropologist and historian David Carrasco, Huitzilopochtli was the name of the Azteca leader who dropped the name Azteca and renamed his people the Mexica as they left their homeland Aztlan and migrated south. They were guided by a prophecy, now immortalized in the Mexican flag. They were told that once they seen an eagle perched on a cactus, they will have found their new homeland. Well, the prophecy came true when the Mexica seen an eagle perched on a cactus in the middle of Lake Texcoco. They would call their new homeland Mexico. That's right. The proper Nahuatl pronunciation is not Mexico, it's not Mexico, it's Mexico. And they turned their swampy new home into a thriving city with great pyramids that appeared to be rising from the middle of the lake, eventually becoming the most powerful empire in all of North America. As for the other Uto-Aztecan tribal groups, many of which exist in the north as previously mentioned, Many of their creation histories explain that the creators gave them life in the lands that they continue to exist in to this day. Some native migration histories mention the exodus of ancient relatives away from their homelands to spread across the rest of the world. This has been a linguistic history of Nahuatl and the Uto-Aztecan language group. Thank you for watching, and join me next time when I talk about how to pronounce Nahuatl words. Tlahtocan.